Welcome to this week's episode of Coach's Corner. My name is Dwayne. Dwyer. I go by the Mindset Coach.
My name is the Uncle Junior, and I go by the Consistency Coach.
And we are your coaches for Coach's Corner. As always, it's an honor to be able to share a conversation with you. But as always, like I tend to say, if you are here just to soak up the information and then just go watch TV and do absolutely nothing with it, this may not be the place for you. However, if you really want to get some good, solid information that will move you, that will help you move forward in life, that will progress you in your relationships, in your in your leadership abilities and things of that nature, you're in the perfect place. You were destined to be here with us. So that being said, let me speak to my brother, the Uncle Junior himself, the Consistency Coach. How you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm doing good, brother. We had just FYI, this is pre-recorded for everybody. But we still here. We in the comments today and yada yada yada. But today, man, we had a great conversation today. Some men and some ladies today, and we got asked some tough questions and we had to answer them. And I'm still kind of thinking about all of that stuff like that. It was a very good conversation. And if you have not watched that episode, you know what I mean, we'll drop the link in there and you can watch it and you can catch up on it. But really good questions that some women had for some men. But man, overall, man, I'm doing great, man. It's been a good week. Another day, another $1.25, enjoying life, enjoying what life has to offer, and enjoying being able to be here this evening and have a conversation with you.
Hey man, likewise. And to your point, I'm glad you brought that up. Shout out to the Hearts of Women. It was a very, very good conversation. And like he said, if you have not had the opportunity to go take a look at it, I submit to you, go take a look at that episode. And keep in mind, it's going to be a part 2. So make sure that you watch part 1 first so that you are postured for part 2. And it may even be a part 3 the way we're going, man. So I love it, man. And like you said, man, it is always an honor to be on this platform, to get behind this microphone and sit across from you and share in conversation, because I look forward to what these conversations unfold. I don't know, I can't tell you what I'm gonna say. I can't tell you what you're gonna say. And I think that's the beauty of these conversations that we have. It's not practice, it's not rehearsed. Like, you have 2 certified coaches who are speaking from the heart with the intent on adding value to every person who takes the time to listen to us.
Yeah. And it's funny how today's topic is about, being resilient and staying resilient. And, when we at the last the show that we was talking about, Lisa was talking about how hopefully she's okay with me sharing this, but how she's still getting used to leading podcasts and leading shows and stuff like this. But you're going to go through trials and errors, just like me and Coach was telling her. We went through all of these things too when we first started off a couple of years ago. But through resiliency and through staying the course and staying consistent, we're able to be here today. And our nerves are not as bad, man, because man, I don't know about you, man, but I remember it wasn't even too long ago. I can say probably sometime this year is when it kind of stopped me being like super nervous before a show, to where like, my armpits are still sweating. I think the last time was a few weeks ago when I had to lead an episode on Hearts of Men podcast on Friday night. We had dropped a link for that too. And it was the first time I had to lead on your show. Now, and it's different when it's on my platform and I'm leading and Coach's Corner, because this is a joint effort. We already know, we've already predetermined who's going to do what show, who's going to lead, and different things like that. So I'm prepared. And this is not like it's just your platform. This is going live or pre-recorded on your platform and it's going live on mine. But when you go into someone else's space, you don't want to be a disservice to that space. It's just like, in a sense, it's kind of like next man up. You're the number 1, I'm the number 2. I come in there but I need to perform, and people are expecting in most cases for the number 2 to perform as the number 1. And for me, that came with a little bit of pressure, and I've done it twice so far. And I would say that the second time was a little bit easier. But I had to have a little resilience.
Thank you for that. That was an awesome example, by the way. And to Lisa, if we just continue along what you're saying, this is why I keep saying, perfection is a fallacy. It is something that we will never attain, but progression is always available. And I think in the space of that, like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Because
Mm-hmm.
in our mind, we want it to be perfect. I want this show to be perfect. I want the consistency coach to say the perfect thing at the perfect time. I want to say the perfect thing at the perfect time. Like you go through all of those things. And then after the show, you'll be like, oh, I missed it. I should have said this and I didn't think about it at that point in time. You will go through all of those bouts. But at the end of the day, it's okay.
Yep.
To you, I thank you for saying that because it really kind of helps me to understand how much you value like what we do over on the hearts of men. But more importantly, this is the thing I talk about when I talk about relationship. Like if I give you my Georgia Bulldog hat, you guys know how I am about the Bulldogs. If I give you this hat, it's valued by me, but I gave it to you, which means that I value you and stuff like that. So what we have to
Mm-hmm.
realize is that the mark of great relationships is the fact that you value the thing that the person that you're in relationship with values. So
Mm-hmm.
if you was to come and park your car in my yard and say, "Hey, me and Shell going on a vacation, I'm gonna trust you with my vehicle." True, got it. Bet I'm gonna put your vehicle in my garage and no one's gonna touch it. The only thing I'm gonna do is go out there and turn the engine over. I may pull it out, turn it around, and pull it back in. That's the most it's gonna get driven. Why? Because
Mm-hmm.
I value you, therefore I value your stuff. And I think a lot of times in the space of relationships, we do it backwards. We end up valuing stuff more than we value the person who actually gave it. So we get to the point of putting the stuff over people, and that's backwards. So thank you for saying that, man. I greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Of course. You ready to get into it today?
Let's do it, bro. Let's
All
do it.
right. Let's do it. Welcome, everybody, to today's episode. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that every man, not only man, every person faces at some point: navigating uncertainty. Life throws curveballs that we don't see coming, whether in our careers, relationships, or even within ourselves. In this discussion, we are here to give you practical tools and real life stories from our own experiences as veterans, fathers, husbands, and coaches. We know how easy it is to get caught up in the chaos of a crisis, to feel overwhelmed and unsure of the next step. But it's in these moments that your mindset, your consistency, and your relationships become your strongest asset. Today, we're going to break down how to build that resilience and walk through uncertainty with confidence and clarity. And, sir, today, with that being said, the first question of the evening is this. And, we like to talk about defining certain things. So we're going to kind of start off with the first question. And it's partly defining this, but in our own way. So, how do you personally define resilience, and how has your understanding of it evolved or transformed, changed throughout your experience? You can take out evolved and you can throw in transformed or whatever words you want to put in there that got you from where you were then to where you are right now when it comes to resiliency.
I see what you did there. I like that. Looking at the question, you say it's partially, and I like that. Um, for me, we look at the word resilient and we believe ideally that the term resilient means to bounce back, to spring back, to overcome and get back into the fight, if you will. And that's not a wrong statement. However, just the term itself, silient, SILIENT, means to spring back. So if silient means to spring back, then to be resilient means to do it again and do it again and do it again and do it again, which is in essence a part of the developmental process. And for me, I think what I had to learn, what I had to come to grips with, is it really didn't matter how I felt about my performance in that moment. The only thing that really mattered is me looking at the lesson that I learned from my performance and then applying that lesson when I do it again. So that's the key for me. In that, I had to, and I hate to use this term, but really, this term really fits the mold of what we talk about time and time again. I had to learn to be stoic in my approach to trying new things, adapting in the midst of doing it, and recognizing that maybe the thoughts that I had prior to doing whatever thing this is was not necessarily the right thing to think about. Maybe I envisioned the outcome wrong. Maybe what I wanted from it was just slightly off, off tilt just a little bit. And so to be resilient in it means that I do not give up. That's number one. But then I go into it with the same level of motivation, the same level of inspiration, the same level of exciting and expectation that I had when I first did it the first time. If I waver in those things, and that's part of the human struggle, right? If I waver in those things, any subsequent time I do it again, then now my resiliency is starting to wane because I didn't hit the reset button. And that's the thing. So to be able to spring back or bounce back is one thing, but to do it again and again and again and again and again, right? That mental elasticity that we tend to talk about, that's the thing. So, for me, again, stressing my experience that has taught me that in the past, my emotions got in the way. And my emotions sometimes prevented me from having that same fire that I had in the beginning to do the thing. Well, I can't say if I don't have that same fire, I can't say that I'm actually exercising the same level of resiliency. I am now being led by my emotions, and ultimately now I'm just going through the motions of doing the thing. So said a lot, bro, but I'm gonna land right there with that response.
Well, since you landed, we're gonna do a touch and go, and I'm gonna pick it on back up and keep it moving. With that being said, man, I dig all of that. I want to add to is my personal definition of resiliency is the ability to be able to deal with things easier the next time they present themselves. Um, right now, that's how I think about it in this moment, and I think that that's usually what happens. Sometimes it's the same thing, and sometimes it cannot be the same thing. Sometimes it could be one thing, but it helps in other areas. And what I mean is that there are times that, if I'm, I'm training for the marathon, right? So I'm running and I run a certain amount of miles. And then, eventually my body becomes, resilient to those miles. Okay. He used to run into two is not really as much anymore. He's kind of body resilient to that. So now we can add on three. And then now my body can handle three. And then it can keep growing and growing and growing. But also I think when it comes to mentally, is similar, but it's different. If my mind is growing, I become more resilient with this discipline that is being grown while I'm running. Then that discipline can help me in other areas too. So I think that that's kind of how I'm defining resiliency now. How has my understanding of it evolved through my experiences? Um, I wrote down time on it. I don't think that I thought that at one time there was a timetable, or there should be a timetable on how fast I develop a certain level of resistance in a specific or in a certain area, right? So, how long should it take me to become more resilient when it comes to dealing with death, right? That's something that most people go through, and that's something that sometimes people build a tolerance to, a resilience to, or whatever. But I thought that at some point that there was a time on it. But I think now it's not really a time on how long it takes to build resilience. I think that depending on what it is, I think that not that there should be a cap, but if certain areas of your life take a long time to build the resiliency up, I think that there may be something else underlying that may be holding you back from being able to develop that resiliency in whatever area that may be.
I don't
Yeah.
disagree with you. I'll go back to the time thing because I think you're onto something there.
Hmm.
Um, it's not, and just to clear it up for everybody who's listening, it's not that we're saying kind of like task, right? So when you look at certain tasks, you can conclude that this task would take X amount of hours to do. And that's not what he's talking about. We're talking about depending upon who the person is, where they are in their life, some of the adversity they've been through in any given point in time. If I've gone through a thing multiple times, say for example, let's just take something simple as a job interview.
Mhm.
My first job interview, I was a bag of cats. Not gonna lie,
Yeah.
nervous, sweating, all kind of stuff like that. Hoping that they see a good product that's sitting in front of them. Hoping I've considered every question that they can ask and all of that other great stuff. But then after you go through multiple job interviews, that should be less. It should be less nerves. It should be less of this and less of that. Especially when you mature, because you change your perspective to not necessarily what they see when they see you. At the end of the day, you're not necessarily concerned with that. Is this the job for me? Are we qualifying each other? It's not just them interviewing me for the job. It's also me interviewing them in the midst of the interview. Do I really want to work for this company? So when they asked me a question, yeah, I got some questions. I got about 5 questions that I considered, before we came up here. First and foremost, what is the overall vision? Not the CEO, but the person I'm going to be working for. What is that person's vision?
Mhm.
How do they view training when it comes down to their employees? Because if they're not a trainer, if they don't view training to be important, I don't know if I want to work there. So it's like the things that you go through, depending upon the number of times that you go through them, you should be able to bounce back faster. Now, the caveat is, like you mentioned, losing a loved one. Um, because it's not the same person, right?
Yeah.
That person does not have the same relationship. It's different when you're talking about a parent compared to a cousin, or a cousin compared to a person that you knew at work. If I just know them, okay, that's fine. Knowing of them is one thing. Knowing them is something totally different. Being friends with them is totally different. Being in close relationship with them again is different. So when these people, start um, when they tend to pass on, that resiliency is going to look different from person to person to person. So I can't use what I went through the last time, from losing a loved one, to what I'm going through now with losing somebody that's near and dear to me. So that's the one thing that I say has to be an exception to the rule. But these other things, when it comes down to the things that people tend to stay stuck in that space of like mental and emotional bliss, they languish because they keep recycling these thoughts in their head. And like we talked about previously, some of it is intentional. They go back and they listen to certain songs and they kind of put themselves in the mental space so that they can think on that thing. Well, now you're meditating on the thing that you no longer have, right? And even if I lost a job that I really like, if I meditate on all the things that I enjoyed at that job, I am putting myself back there, and I am delaying the bounce back capabilities from happening in my life. So I think you're on to something with the time frame.
Think you just said something about hunting the good stuff over there. If anybody ever been through the master resiliency trainer course in the military, probably can relate to that, man. And speaking of military, and speaking of some of the things we just talked about before, there's a certain thing called crisis, and when crisis comes, what are we going to do? You've mentioned the words, ebbs and flows in life. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, that means that there are going to be some highs, there are going to be some lows, there are going to be some ups, there are going to be some downs, there are going to be some birth, there are going to be some deaths. That's just part of life, but how we deal with it, I think, is most important. But before we can deal with them in a natural sense, I think that the mindset, or what goes on in the mind first, is what's going to determine what's going to happen once the crisis happens. So in times of crisis, what role does mindset play in helping us, or helping you, stay grounded?
It is the I would say it like this: mindset is the arena in which crisis either remains a crisis or is de-escalated to a manageable task, if you will, or a de-escalated to a thing that has tasks that must be accomplished that are manageable. I love the fact that you started off with the military, because in the army, what we did is we trained for crisis. That's really what the army is. The army, believe it or not, is a huge crisis management organization. So what they do is we go through training episodes after training episodes after training episodes to actually deal with crisis. So what are we actually doing? That means that if I put you in a situation to where a crisis can potentially happen, your ability to make sound decisions in the midst of crisis to mitigate the crisis as best you possibly can equates to a desirable outcome. That's the thing what the military does. So it puts you in a position to where, as a leader, when you look at said crisis that's before you, you kind of expected it. You expected the crisis. You expected the crisis to present itself in this fashion. Therefore, we already have viable solutions that are on the shelf. That all we got to do is pick it out, plug it in, and then play it. And so it is the mindset of the leader to be able to look at it and identify it as being the thing, and then now start working through the crisis management plan. Well, I think the same thing can present itself in life as well. I don't, I cannot say with honesty that a lot of companies that I've been a part of, that I've witnessed, that we actually go through crisis management. However, what I will say is we do risk management. And so we do, kind of like project risk management to where we identify the things that can potentially go wrong. And then in identifying the things that potentially go wrong, we assign a person to that and say, if this situation presents itself to where all of these things look like this crisis is about to happen, this risk is about to happen, now you and your team spring into action so that we can come up, so that we can exercise the solution that we did. But every organization doesn't do that, right? And so a lot of times when crisis happens, it's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? I don't know. And if that's the mindset of the leader, the whole team can potentially be that way as well. So your mindset must be, and it takes me back to that word, you kind of, and I hate to say it, and I know a lot of people don't like it, but you got to have a degree of stoicism to where you see a crisis. If it is a crisis, you see a crisis, and then now you know that you have to make sound judgments in the midst of said crisis so that your team members can not only be confident in what you're doing, confident in your abilities, but trust that you're going to see them through to the end in the midst of that crisis.
If I remember correctly, you have mentioned a few times about crisis, and you've talked about everything is not a crisis. So, if you can, before I go, can you share real quickly in 30 to 1 minute um, your little, not your little, but what you have said before in the past, or kind of share with us when your thoughts about, when people saying, talking about everything ain't a crisis. So can you just hit on that real quick?
Sure, absolutely. And I said it exactly just like that. I said everything, just because it's a crisis to you, does not necessarily make it a crisis for me. When we're talking in an organization, the thing that makes it a crisis is its ability to derail the organizational strategic plan. That if the organization says if this thing shows up, it is 100% a crisis to us. What they're saying is that this thing has the ability to short circuit the strategic plan, and it could set us back maybe millions of dollars, maybe months or years at a time. I give you a perfect example. Hurricane Helene. That is without a doubt a crisis, not just to the federal government, but to the state government, to the local county, to the local officials, everything. Everybody deemed it to be a crisis. Why? Because there are billions of dollars in recovery that goes into it. But coming back to a more stable foundation when it comes down to certain things, if it doesn't go against the vision, if it doesn't go against the organization's strategic plan, then it may not necessarily be a problem. It may not necessarily be a crisis. It might just be a problem. And every problem does not necessarily need me to action something against it for it to be solved. Maybe that problem can just work itself out if we allow the problem to show up. What is it teaching me? Right? That's the other piece that we need to understand. So and I'm going back to the mindset piece, right? That's where leaders have to understand when to act, when to wait. And most leaders, good leaders, ask multiple layers of questions to get multiple perspectives of this crisis or perceived crisis. And once they perceive that it's not a crisis, it's your interpretation that it might be a crisis. Now it's just a problem. So now, why is it a problem? Let's kind of continue to develop the situation, is what we call it. When you continue to develop the situation, you'll realize that that problem actually can be more progressive in nature than it can be stifling. Every problem that we see is not necessarily a problem. Some
Yeah.
problems come about to show us some things in our plan. And if we make the right decision at the right moment, it can propel us forward at a more expedited rate.
I like expedition, especially when it comes to learning and growth. Sometimes I like, I always enjoy the journey. Sometimes I be wanting to get to the end of stuff. And sometimes, the universe allows me to get to the end and get to it fast and it works in my favor. But I've and more than not is usually a journey that goes along with the lesson. The way I want to answer this question, I before you hit it, I just wrote it down, and I wrote down train as you fight. In times of crisis, what role does mindset play in helping you stay grounded? I think the role of the mindset plays is that the role or the mindset. I'm looking at the mindset as being a vase or a container that holds the tools or the information that tells you how to deal with crisis. So what happens is this is my mindset, right? So this is what I use to clean off my notes, right? There's a container, so it holds things. So what happens is as life goes on, this is what's determining our mindset. So we put in negative stuff, social media, relationships, all of these different things, right? So when crisis happen, this is where we're going to pull from. So I say that crisis, that the role of the mindset is to be a vessel. So whatever you put in your vessel is what's going to come out during the time of crisis. So if you haven't prepared for crisis, then when crisis happen, it's probably going to be a little bit more challenging for you than if you would have prepared. Now there are always going to be certain things that happen that we can't prepare for, like we talked about death, but we all know that it's going to happen sometime, but still we don't always prepare. Sometimes, 27-year-old or 21-year-old so and so gets in a car accident or something like that and it's not their fault. You know what I'm saying? These things happen, so it's not that we can necessarily prepare for every single crisis that happens, but I think that we can do some justice or we can help facilitate some of these things by consistently putting things in our mindset or in our vessel that helps us grow. You focus on your mind and you continue to try to build yourself. When times of crisis happen, you can, and a lot of times you can be a little bit more grounded when certain things happen.
Absolutely, I agree. And I love your analogy of your container there, because container and arena, if you think about it, they're kind of like one and the same.
Mm,
So that's why I love it. Not that's not why I love it, but it's an accurate assertion. And you heard the old saying, "Garbage in, garbage out." So
hmm.
if I'm not preparing for these things to actually be possible, then when they do happen, I am unprepared to respond to them. So what I put in my container, the arena, what I put in is not just it works to my favor in the long term because again, going back to crisis, if crisis presents itself, now what? And I share this with you during the hurricane Helene. You could literally see if you just step back and look, there were some people who were very well prepared, right? And I'm not talking about their amenities because that's where we get stuck at because we're so accustomed to having things, but they were more prepared mentally. And because they were more prepared mentally, they handled that adversity different. They focused on the bare necessities first. And once they had the bare necessities, they had water. They didn't have electricity, but they had water. They had gas burning stoves. So they can do those two things. So they knew at that point, okay, I got a cooler. Let me go put some ice in my cooler. And as long as I keep ice in my cooler every 24 hours, then I can preserve the food that I have. And they use that as their springboard to move forward. And then what those people started doing, they started helping other people. And so that's kind of like what I'm saying. To where other people, they're like, oh my God, the internet's not working. Man, that's your listen, listen, man.
Yeah.
And I laugh, but
Mhm.
I get it as well because you're so accustomed to having a thing that everything in your life is patterned off of this thing functioning. So it really should teach all of us a lesson. And I'm only using this as an example. It really should teach all of us a lesson that in the times where the harvest is plentiful, we got to make sure that we're preparing for famine as well. And that starts here. This is where you do your preparation for famine. Just don't just bask in the goodness of life as it is right now. Consider, well, what would happen if this happened? What would happen if that happened? How am I postured if this was to happen? If I do those things now, then I may find that if that adversity happens, I'm well prepared.
And I like that. um we're both over the age of 40. You know, we both were in the military, we're both retired, we both had, long-term relationships. We have a lot of different we have a lot of similarities. Um but when it comes to the journey, where we are today, it started somewhere way back in the day. Somewhere there was something, right? um and during that journey, there were certain things, there were certain moments that happened in order to get us to where we are today. um the question is, I want to go first, give you a break. But the question is this: what are some key moments in your journey where consistency proved to be the difference between success and failure? I will say this, in certain things, when it came to me getting married, my marriage and my purpose. Hold on, I was writing at the same time. Those are two key moments in my journey where consistency proved to be the difference between success and failure. So during the pandemic, during COVID, during that time, I started going in on myself and learning a lot about myself. I was consistent with running. I think at one time, I think I ran or walk 109 days straight, no days off, Sunday included. And I learned so much. I listened to a lot of David Goggins. I listened to a lot of Eric Thomas. I listened to a lot of different people who were men and who were trying to get, just teaching, John Maxwell, just teaching about how to be better people. But it took consistency. But through that consistency and through that journey, I learned more about who I was. I found out who I was as a man, as a person, as a human, as a son, as a father, all of these different things because I was consistent, right? But though that journey, there was a lot. If I wouldn't have went through that journey and I wasn't consistent with it, how would my finances be right now? How would my marriage be right now? Would I have even figured out my purpose? I don't think I would have. I think it was during that time I was super focused and I was super consistent. And through that long, hard freaking journey, because there was a huge mind shift about certain things. Like I thought differently. Like my eyes were open to more things because I started getting more information. I started learning more about who I was. I don't accept certain behaviors from people anymore. What? You mean I don't have to just kiss somebody's butt anymore? And I don't have to bend over backwards to coddle my words with people? This was uncommon information for me. This was new information. I never heard that before. So because I got to learn more about who I was as a person, I moved differently, So, and that was definitely some of the differences between the successes and failures in my finances, my marriage, and in my purpose.
Man, I love that response. I think as we look at this question, there's a number of things that we can choose from, right? We could choose from when we finish our degree plan. We can choose when we started this journey down the coaching trail. We can, view our time in the military. Like there are several moments that can be highlighted. But for me, the one I want to talk about is fatherhood because I think it's safe to assume that every person, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, you want to be a good parent. And so the perception of good in your mind articulates success or failure. But then you start looking at like relevant facts. And if your child is successful, that means that you were a successful parent. If does that mean if I have multiple children and one is successful and one is not so successful? You see what I'm saying? So I think what we have to learn, what I had to learn, is that in the scope of fatherhood, and again to your point, having a failed marriage, that kind of influences it as well. So in the midst of this journey where consistency proved the difference between success and failure, I had to look at how consistent am I for the things that I felt that a father should be doing, whether they were in my house or not in my house. And then leave the notion of success or failure to the concept of a good relationship between you and your child. And again, if you have multiple children, you guys know just as well as I know, those relationships look different. You may have a great relationship with one, and the other one you may have it's still room to grow there, right? But for me, the thing I say first and foremost, does the relationship exist? Can you say, let me look at every child that I have. Do you have a relationship? Do you have a relationship? If you can say yes to every last one of them, that is success. That's the first layer of success. Now, how good is the relationship is where the consistency now kicks in. Like you just said, I don't have to kiss nobody but. I'm just saying it. I know it's not a popular conversation. I give my children, from my perspective, from my understanding, out of the 50 years that I've been alive, I give my children what they need, not necessarily what they want. Sometimes what I give them, they don't necessarily want that. And I have to be okay with that. But that's no different, in my opinion, than any other relationship that I have. And for the people who understand relationship, they value the things that I give them because they recognize that it's actually for my good that this is what he has given me. Well, when you're in your 19, 20 years old, Dad, I need the money. Let me get the money. Well, I'm not, I'm gonna give you something more valuable than money. Not to me right now. Right now, what's valuable is the money. If you pay attention to what I'm sharing with you, it will get you beyond this hurdle that you're dealing with. Right. So that to me, and this is, I think this is the thing that most parents deal with regardless of whether they're in the home or not, whether you're still married or single, as a single mother or a single father, I think this is the thing that you deal with because every parent wants to do a good job. They want they want that understanding. They want that confidence to know that I've been a successful parent. And the only way that you can deem initially whether success has happened is when you look at their life and see that their life being successful. Well, I submit that that's not always the measure of success because you got to keep in mind that child as an adult, they get a vote. So whatever they choose to do, that's their choice. Now, are you going to be adult enough as a parent to just give them advice and not intervene in the decision that they make? Because that's the progressive nature of parenting. So this for me is a very heavy question, as you can tell, a very loaded question. It's one that I've thought into for like I would say like every year. Every year, like how am I showing up for my kids? How am I helping them to become the best versions of themselves? Like one child may need more attention than the other. Well, if I give this one more attention than the other, will this one feel neglected? I can't own how they feel, but it's a question that I ask myself. So I try to spread myself amongst them equally as best I possibly can. To me, that is success.
I like where you went with fatherhood or even parenthood, because there's a lot of different people that may be watching this show. And I think that's something that I never really thought about. because I have often thought about it being a parent as a journey, but or however, comma, there's a lot of different successes and failures that go into being a parent in this journey. I've been a parent for 28 years now. So Brandon, when he was first born, is not the same way I parent him that he's 28. You know, how much should I be inputting into his life at 28? You know what I'm saying? What he needed from me at 1, at 2, at 3 months is not what he needed from me when he was 16, when he was in middle school, when he was playing football, when he was in the band. So and before he got married and he was in the army. And so it's like, I'm glad you brought that up because this is a long journey. Being a parent is a long journey, and it doesn't end until one of you guys roll up out of the door. Until one of you end up in the dirt. So I think I don't know, man. It's just that right there just opened up a lot of thought for me, and I don't want to spend the rest of the show just over here thinking about it and just dwelling on this question. So that is something that I think I am going to do a lot more exploring about, because of the changes and the ebbs and flows of the journey of a parent is a long process.
It is. And like you, I've been doing it for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, my range is the oldest one is 30 and the youngest one is 19. In fact, he'll be 20 next month.
Mm.
So it's like you got to look at in that 10, 11-year time span, it's a difference. That 30-year-old gets a different version of me than that 19-year-old right now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and I'm just being honest, unfortunately, do I want to give that 19-year-old what I'm giving that 30-year? Absolutely. But here's
Mm-hmm.
the deal. It's almost like they flip-flop. The 30-year-old wants what the 19-year-old should want, and the 19-year-old is pursuing what the 30-year-old is supposed to be doing. So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's like you have to make room and space for whoever they are, but
Yeah.
still hold firm to who you are as well. So I don't dictate to the 19-year-old how to be. I don't dictate to the 30-year-old how to be. I don't dictate to the boys. I train the boys and I nurture the girls, right? Do the boys want nurturing? Sure. I'm almost certain they want nurturing, the same nurturing that I give the girls, but the girls get a different daddy than the boys get. The oldest get a different daddy than the youngest get. The boys are the oldest and the youngest. The girls are in the middle. So it's like all of them get the version of me that the current version of them is requiring in that moment, and that becomes the journey.
Yeah, man, and since you talked about that, man, we something that everybody goes through, or something that's in everybody's life on a daily basis, is for the most part is their social life and their family life. And we all know that sometimes people we deal with, they I'll just leave it at that, and I'll just put the question up there. All right. So when facing challenges in social or family dynamics, how do you balance staying firm in your principles while also being adaptable? Now, to add on to this, or do you adapt?
I still like the last part. Um, I think a lot of times we view social being totally separate than family. And I think and if I can go as far as saying this, that's kind of antiquated. Should it be that family is isolated and then social is isolated as well? But I think what ends up happening is that they bleed into one another. And so there are people that did not come from my father or my mother that I view as family, you being one of them. We don't share the same parents, but I view you as my brother. It's not just something that I say on this platform. It's not just something that I want everybody to believe. And then it's like, oh, well, they don't really talk. Yeah, we actually do talk. I actually, when I call his wife my sister, she is my sister because he's my brother. We don't have to come from the same parents to be family. That's for starts. That's where I have to start, because there is this invisible line that keeps us stuck in a particular thing. Because on the other hand, there are certain people in our family who just want to be social. They don't want to be a part of your family. And you got to be okay, like I said about my kids. You got to be okay with whatever they choose in their life. I don't wish them any harm. I don't, you see what I'm saying? None of that stuff is available. But I really do want them to experience the best version of their life. So when it comes down to balancing my principles and being adaptable, I don't necessarily adapt. Like my principles are my principles. If they don't necessarily believe in my principles, that's okay. I don't view them as being like the scum of the earth. No, they have their own minds, they have their own perspective, they have their own ideas, and I appreciate them for being honest enough to tell me. The ones I don't too particularly vibe well with is the one who says that we have shared principles just so that they can be in the fold, and then come to find out that they never really had shared principles. They just wanted to get close enough to the fire to get a little warmth. That's it. Be honest. But whoever you are, say that, do that, be that. You don't necessarily have to adapt to the principles until you find flaws in your principle. And again, you have to ask yourself, what is the metric that you're measuring the flaw of your principle? If it is based upon another principle, which is should be, then that's the thing. But principles should beget principles. So when you have those, you don't necessarily adapt or accept anything that goes against them, against those principles, even if it's from a family member.
One of the things that you mention often is called boundaries, right? So that's the way you stay balanced. It's the way you have balance and stand firm on your principles is by having boundaries. My principles are my principles. They're not changing. They're not going to be adapted. Like I said, I mean, like you mentioned, with new information or with something like this, if I figure out or I find through some conversation or something that my principle is flawed, then absolutely I have no problem adopting a new principle or adjusting that principle. But in all actuality, I don't think that it's wise to be, in my personal opinion, to just be adapting your principles, especially when it comes to social and family dynamics. Again, like Coach said, unless there's some sort of flaw in there. So other than that, that's why I like the part like you said, or do you adapt? No, not adapting. I'm not changing who I am. I'm not gonna One of my principles in life is that I respect all people. Ooh, I don't mean step on nobody's toes, but that mean all people. That mean regardless of the situation I find myself in on social media or with my family, I still respect people. When I'm at home with my husband, I still respect my husband. When I'm at home with my wife, I still respect my wife. If that is a principle, nothing adjusts. I don't balance anything. That's my principle. That's how I live my life. So, and nothing gets me off track, or it shouldn't. And if it does,
Yeah,
that's
and
just
and and if I can, just one
yeah.
quick, I think that has to be the key because that's one of my principles as well, to respect people, period.
Mhm.
But whatever a person chooses to do with their life, that does not mean I stop respecting them. I still respect them. I
Yep.
don't necessarily have to agree with what they do. I
Mhm. Or
think
deal with you.
or deal with it, right? I
Mhm.
think a lot of times what we believe that if a person does not agree, then that makes them the enemy. No, I'm not your enemy. I just don't necessarily agree that that thing that you're doing is what we as people should be doing. But
Mhm.
each his own. But I
Yep.
still respect you, and that's okay.
Yep. I definitely agree 100%. Ladies and gentlemen, appreciate you for tuning in here so far. We got a few more things to go. We got some true false questions. We got some multiple choice. We have some scenario questions. And then we're going to end the show possibly with actionable advice. But with that being said, man, let's move on to these true and false questions. The first one: maintaining a consistent routine can significantly improve mental resilience during times of crisis.
We need a timer for these
We
things.
do need a timer.
That way we'll know when we can answer because I
Hmm.
want to give everybody the opportunity to answer the question.
Yeah,
As
I
they're
think somebody probably just ran to the phone right now. They probably just had it sitting on a little device. Oh, let me hurry up and get over there to the chat.
I know, right? Um, I love this question because as you read this question, there's a part that you see, you be like, true. But then there's another part you see that be like false. And it's like,
Hmm.
wait a minute, which one is it? So remember, we're talking resiliency, right? Maintaining a consistent routine can significantly improve mental resiliency during times of crisis. Well, true and false, right? And this is why I say that. I know this is why I say that, because the consistent routine gives me a baseline. It gives me a process to which I do things. So when I do things, when I get behind this computer, there's certain ways that I go through setting it up. But then what happens when I run into an issue? Now that consistency in routine has made it possible for me to identify the problem or the crisis or whatever you want to call it, right? So now being flexible when crisis shows itself is what makes this false, because I have to exercise what is called mental agility at this point. I have to come outside of that routine so I can maneuver around this crisis. What am I going to do to mitigate the problem? So that's why I say true and false. I think the if I had to single it down to a single answer, the answer is false. But I think the answer is true and false.
Okay. Okay. Moving on.
What was the answer?
That was the answer.
Okay, very well.
But whatever it is you wanted. I think
Okay.
now I think I'm going away from giving the direct true or false, because I think, you know, a lot of these are true and false. I think there's different perspectives, and I like how you were able to pull out the different perspective and,
Mm.
from the two. So I think I'm just gonna leave it up there.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
taking that and put it in my. I like what you did, and here's why.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times we get fixed. What's the right answer? What's the right answer?
Yeah.
What's the right answer? But
Mm-hmm.
really, your ability to articulate it as a right answer is the right. Very
Mm-hmm.
good. Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
We're gonna let the people figure it out. If you
Yes,
want to
sir.
say it's true, if you want to say it's false, we can give our answer, and I can give what I think it is, but I'm not going to give a definitive true or false. Here we
All right.
go.
I bet you somebody said he don't want to answer the question because he was wrong. That's what they said.
They probably did. And you
Yes,
know what? They may be partially right, but it
you are
doesn't it doesn't it doesn't mean that everything that I said wasn't true as well. They both can be true,
exactly.
even though that one wasn't. I already got the answers. I came up with them. I wrote the questions.
There we go.
Um, Building strong relationships is essential to thriving during uncertain times. I think I think this is going to be in that same category, but I am interested to hear what you have to say about it.
It can be in the same category.
It can be, because it depends on who you have that relationship with.
It also depends on the uncertain times.
Depends on the uncertain times.
So see, we
Mhm.
just confuse people who just already gave an answer, and they're like, wait a minute, let me give you a
Yeah.
different answer now. And that's okay, right? I think this can be true. Building strong relationships is essential to thriving during uncertain times. We've seen that during COVID-19. We
Mm-hmm.
experienced a lot of cabin fever, and our
Mm-hmm.
ability to reach outside of the house, whether it's via Zoom or whatever the case may be, it kind of helped us to get through. Um, but then by that same token, the other part to it is mental resiliency is also essential to
Mm-hmm.
thriving in certain times as well. My breaking point may look different than somebody else's breaking point. So I think it's not just building strong relationships. Sure, that is a part of the process. So the answer is true, but in conjunction with that, mental resiliency is also essential. Um, Doing also essential to thriving during uncertain times. Um, my ability to adapt is also essential to thriving during uncertain times. So it's a number
Mm-hmm.
of different answers that can go here. But to
Yeah.
this question, building strong relationships is essential. I say true.
So if I'm gonna give a definitive answer, I'm probably gonna say no. And here's why. I can build a great relationship with coach, but that doesn't mean that coach can help me thrive during those uncertain times. The only way coach can help me thrive is if he has the tools to help me thrive during those uncertain times. And just because he answers the phone and talks to me and says yes and gives me advice on my situation doesn't mean that he's right. He could be right, but he may not be. So just having a relationship with somebody ain't enough,
Right.
in my opinion. So I see true, because if you are a person and you need people to talk
Mhm.
to, and that's the way you are, that's the way you are wired. But I don't need that. I,
Mhm.
I don't need just a relationship.
Agree.
I need coach to have the tools for my crisis when I call. Now, even if we ain't got a strong relationship, if I call, let's say if I call Ro and I ain't got a good relationship with Ro, but I know Ro is a licensed whatever marriage counselor,
Mhm.
eh, I might be able to chat with him and talk to him about it. So I see true and I
Mhm.
see false. I think here we are again. Whoever's in the chat, whatever you said, can you articulate and can you justify your perspective?
What saith ye?
Said he. I like that.
Yeah, man.
Okay. Nugget on that one. Those both good nuggets. Let me see. We got 5 minutes. Oh, we probably go over today. Um, not too much. Here we go. Last one. Taking talking. I'm sorry, not talking. Taking small, consistent actions after a setback is less effective than trying to solve the problem all at once.
This sounds familiar. It does. It does sound familiar.
It is for me because we did it before. Get rid of this question. Wrong one. Here we go. A crisis is more about external challenges than internal responses to those challenges.
Mm, 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 mm,
This
mm,
question, though,
mm. So I don't think they're confused. And I know the first two questions was kind of like, wait, this could be true, false. This could be true, false. I think they got a definitive answer on
I
this one.
think this is pretty definitive
This
too.
one is a pretty definitive answer here. A crisis is more about external challenges than internal responses to those challenges. You have received an F on this one. False.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Yep. Whatever you
Exactly.
put in your mind is you're going to be your internal response. So doing those challenges, you're going to pull out. Yeah, I think there was a definitive false on there too.
Yeah,
And
man.
let's move right along into these whatchamacallit questions. What they call
Oh,
multiple choice. Multiple choice. Look at the dog. The dog is here. He's waving. I put that on there. Shell likes dogs, so this question is for her. Shell, or anybody else in the chat, or who's ever there watching. Which of the following is most essential in maintaining resilience during a crisis? A rigid plan, emotional awareness, strong relationships, consistency.
which of the following is most essential
Most.
in maintaining resiliency during a crisis? As they're answering, I'm going to weed out the one that everybody knows is not the answer.
Mm-hmm.
The one that's not the answer is A,
Mm-hmm.
right? Again, essential in maintaining, most essential, I'm sorry, most essential in maintaining resiliency. The answer that I have to go to here is definitely B. B is the primary answer, emotional awareness, right? Because that helps me to understand where I am in the space of this crisis. And it also helps me to detect and sense how everybody else is around me. That's maintaining resilience. Um, does a rigid plan have a play in it? Sure. Does strong relationships have a play in it? Sure. Does consistency have a play in it? Sure. But the answer to me is B, emotional awareness.
There you go. There's your definitive question from Coach. However, I can definitely see some other ones. So if you
Mhm.
are watching this and you're in the chat, look and add your, if you think something different than any of these, then please put your response and why in the
Right.
chat. I would love we would really love to hear, your response, your perspective on these different questions right here.
Absolutely.
The next one, when faced with a social crisis, what's the best approach to managing uncertainty? A, withdraw and avoid, address it head on with clarity, let others dictate the response, or ignore the situation.
It is D. The answer is D. Ignore it
E,
all. Walk away.
ignore it.
Just
Right.
ignore
Moving
it. Walk
on.
away.
Next
No, just
question. There you go. D.
We know D wasn't the answer. That's why
Yeah,
we're
not
playing.
D.
I think this is interesting
Did you
because
mean A?
yeah, that one too. Um, Uncertainty is that thing. A lot of people struggle in the space of uncertainty because they have control concerns. I won't say control issues. I say control concerns. So when it comes down to things that are uncertain, it's like, oh, I don't know what to do. So I think when it comes down to situations that we're uncertain about, we need to address it head on with clarity. If we do not address it head on with clarity, then we're just allowing things to happen. We're just waiting to see if it's going to unfold. Sometimes we may find ourselves in a situation to where that thing must dictate our response, like the hurricane. You can plan as much as you possibly can, but all in all, you got to wait for it to pass before the response happens. But the clear answer here is definitely B. Address it head on with clarity.
All right, B. I like it. Okay, here we go. How can you best ensure that you're emotionally stable during challenging times? A. Rely solely on yourself. Engage in consistent reflection and communication. C. Ignore your feelings. Or D. Seek immediate distractions.
Why would I not seek immediate distraction, bro?
I know, right?
I'm just saying. I
Not
want.
saying that there ain't a time and place for it, though.
I don't want. I don't want to think on this. I don't want to put my mind on it. You know, this really reminds me of the conversation we happened earlier too.
Mm
Right when the question came about the question about adultery. Right.
hmm. Mm hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
It really does put me in the sense of that. Um. However, I think the answer here, for the sake of time, has to be engage in consistent reflection and communication.
Yep.
That's
Like
how I
that.
can ensure that I'm emotionally stable. Relying solely on myself, there are certain things that I cannot see because we all have blind spots. So I need somebody to share some things with me that I do not know and be open to their response. Ignoring your feelings is never the accurate answer, and it's never accurate to project your feelings as well. So you have to find that space in recognizing how you feel, right? But then sitting with how you feel so that you can learn something about yourself based upon how you feel without projecting the raw emotion. Once you learn the lesson, that you learn from your emotions about said situation, you got to analyze it altogether, compare it to those principles that we talked about previously. Now those principles tell you, say, hey, that's a you issue, not a them issue. Well, if it's a me issue, there's no need for me to bring it up. If it's not a me issue, now let's engage it. Let's engage it. Let's go talk to them. Let's have open, honest conversation like the previous one, with clarity. Address it with
Yep.
clarity. That's it.
Got it. Here we go. Another question. Which mindset shift is key to handling personal uncertainty? A. Blame others for setbacks. B. Focus only on the outcome. C. Embrace adaptability and growth. D. Expect immediate solutions.
But you just wanted this one to be clear here.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted
Mm-hmm.
this to be clear and concise.
Clear and precise. No ifs, ands, or
No
buts.
ifs, ands, or buts. I got it. So yeah, I think they already got this one. This is definitely
Yeah.
C.
See, it
Embrace
is.
adaptability and growth.
I agree 100,000%.
Yeah, man.
Moving on, we got our first question. This is in our personal life. So you are navigating a major career shift and you are unsure about the future. The uncertainty brings up feelings of self-doubt and fear of failure. How do you build the mental resilience to keep moving forward despite these feelings?
Very good question. This is kind of like what I was talking about uncertainty prior to. A lot of times we struggle in the space of uncertainty and we automatically assume the rest. And everybody who to some degree in their life graduated from MSU. They tend to make stuff up. So if you don't know, something, you will fill in the blank, and you fill in the blank probably comes from the information that you have in your past. So the question that we have to now entertain within ourselves is, why do I feel self doubt, fear of failure in the midst of uncertainty? What is it about uncertainty that puts me automatically in fear and doubt? That's for starters. I need to do some work in that arena first so that I can become better equipped to handle uncertainty. Once I address fear of failure and self doubt, then it should teach me some things about myself. And learning some things about myself, I do the research, the reflection, and look at how they've shown up incrementally throughout time. And then what I need to do from there is plot the course to releasing self doubt and releasing fear of failure in the absence of information. Because again, that's all uncertainty is. It is absent. It is literally the absence of information about what to expect in the future. Well, if anybody kind of did the mental analysis, that's actually called faith. You cannot know the outcome for the thing and call it faith. If you know the outcome, it is no longer faith. So now, what is my disconnect from that? Because that's the deal. I don't want to exercise faith. I want to exercise control, which means I need to know. So now I got to go back and research all of that. And in researching all of that, you should hopefully get to the point of understanding that it's okay to be in the midst of uncertainty and not necessarily have the need to know. And that's the thing I talk about a lot. The need to know gets us in trouble a lot. Not necessarily needing having the need to know when it comes down to the future and regulate myself, my emotions in that space and be comfortable. And every time I feel that uncertainty, refocus and recenter myself and be okay with not knowing.
Boom. I like it. Next one, we are digging into the social life aspect of this right now. All right. So, the social life, a close friend has become distant and uncommunicative, leading to uncertainty in your relationship. How do you navigate this shift while maintaining your own emotional health and attempting to preserve the friendship? Um, I'll answer this one.
Okay.
For sake of time, unless you want it.
I mean, I'm ready. It's up
Go
to you.
ahead. Roll with it.
Easy. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. I navigate my emotional health by not attempting to preserve and recognize that my friend is an adult that can make their own decision. And like I said
Mhm.
previously, whatever they decide with their life, I'm okay with because I want what's best for them. Them making this decision, they obviously felt that this was best for them. So I focus on my emotional health and removing myself from the space of need to know because that's what it is. I need to know what's going on. No, you don't. What you need to do is realize that you have no control over the situation or that person. Only person I control is me.
And if that person is not communicating, they are letting me know with their actions how they may feel about the relationship, at least at this point in their life. And the reality of it is, needs to be, not every friendship needs to be preserved. Maybe these are just the initial or the beginning signs of a relationship that may be, that may not be going well, or that it may not be worth the investment. So, appreciate that, man.
Yeah, man.
This was the easy one.
Hmm.
Quick one. Fitness and well life. Ooh, slow down some, Tiger. Fitness well life. You hit a plateau in your fitness journey during a time of personal crisis. Motivation is low, and the uncertainty around other areas of your life makes it hard to stay committed. How do you maintain discipline and stay consistent in your fitness routine during this uncertain time?
See, this one is a little bit more tricky uh,
Mm-hmm.
because I first see it's a couple of things that stand out to me. The first one is definitely the fitness plateau
Mm-hmm.
um, because plateau can look different. Plateau may mean that I am plateauing from what I'm doing physically. You see it in the gym all the time. A lot of times we hit most dudes go to the gym and they want to pump iron and get swole, and they get mad at a certain point because they're not gaining.
You'll see the growth.
Right? They don't see the growth.
Yeah.
They're hitting the gym every day. They to consuming protein, but I'm not seeing the growth. Well, scientifically, you're only going to gain 13 pounds or 12. What was it? 12 or 13 pounds of muscle in 1 year. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe you've already achieved that in that year, and now you have to continue to go through the process for the new year to come around. Now, how that is spread out, it's very difficult for me to articulate based upon a person's body mass, their makeup, and so forth and so on. So maybe it is just my idea of the plateau that makes it a personal crisis, right? Because and it's how I'm reading it. because it says you've hit a plateau in your fitness journey during a time of personal crisis. So maybe the crisis is outside of it. And so maybe the personal crisis has your attention to where your fitness journey is lagging at this particular point in time.
Mhm.
You're still trying to maintain consistency with your fitness journey, but this personal crisis also have your attention subconsciously. So maybe, and I'm refocused now. I kind of got off track a little bit. So maybe it's okay to take a break, just a little break from your fitness journey and divert your attention to the personal crisis. And the reason why I'm saying that because I can assume that it is a crisis because it's being called one. I don't know what the crisis is,
Yeah.
right? That's important to understand as well. Crisis is important. It will drain you psychologically, emotionally, and mentally. And to try to in the midst of this particular crisis, whatever that crisis may be, your fitness journey might be a distraction. So we have to consider those things. I know that's what I want to do, but the question has to be at this point, what do I need to do? If this is deemed a crisis and it is truly a crisis, well, I mean, not a whole lot of people was going out there and hitting the gym immediately following Hurricane Helene. You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying? So sometimes it's okay to take a break,
Mm.
reset, right? Reset mentally, reset emotionally, focus on this crisis, make sure that I am good, make sure that my loved ones are good, right? Because I am postured because of my fitness journey to actually be a helper in the midst of crisis. If for those of you who don't know, you being physically fit makes you well postured for crisis. It makes you perform better in crisis. So because I have a fitness journey, when crisis hit, I can now be a helper to everybody else. But I can also be a help, an immediate, a quick help to myself because of this fitness journey that I have. So let's hit the pause button just momentarily on the fitness journey. Focus on the crisis. Make sure that everybody is good, to include myself. Don't because we tend to neglect ourselves a lot. Make sure that everybody is good. And then once the crisis has lowered down to just a problem to where there isn't a solution but time, now I can go back to my fitness journey because this now is therapeutic for me.
Yeah, I like that. It sounds like if I'm paraphrasing or kind of, summing up some of that is that if it's a real crisis, like we're assuming this question is, then maybe it may be best to focus on that right now, and other things maybe have to take a back burner, and then at some point in your mind having to be okay with that. You
Yes.
know what I mean? Accepting the fact that hey, this is a real crisis. I need to deal with this,
Yeah.
and yes, I may still work out, but there may not be as much into it. You know what I
Correct.
mean? Maybe I need to be okay with just plateauing right now. And
Yeah.
then after the crisis is dealt with, I can go back and renegotiate and figure out what to do when it comes to my level of motivation and my plateauing and my fitness journey. So
Sure.
I like that, man.
Yeah.
I like
And
where
and
you went with that. I
and
wasn't expecting.
no, no. And the other part I would add is that because we understand I'm plateauing right now, I'm
Hmm.
not trying to achieve gains. I'm not trying to ramp up what I'm doing. I'm just
Hmm.
I'm just using fitness during the time of crisis to clear my head.
Yeah, I like that. Like that. Next question. Love life. You're facing a challenging period in your marriage. There's tension from financial struggles and communication is breaking down. How do you balance addressing the immediate issues while staying emotionally resilient and consistent in showing up for your partner?
This my answer is going to sound very similar to what I said earlier.
Mhm.
Um, I need to regulate what I'm feeling. It's not going to do me good to take the raw emotions of what I'm feeling to the conversation table with my partner because it's automatically going to put my partner on the defense. Regulate my how I'm feeling. Lay the facts out. Let's talk about the facts. Let's address the facts so that we collectively can come up with a viable solution to our current problem set. Once we come up with a viable solution, then we action said viable solution. But again, I can't come to the table emotionally without regulating them because when I do come emotionally, now I'm running into the risk of you becoming defensive. Once you become defensive, you go into self protection, and you being self protective does not necessarily fare good when it comes down to this problem that we have. Also, I probably need to recognize that I might be part of the problem too, right? How did I allow, and I'm just going to use this hypothetical, hypothetically speaking, let's just say that she messed up all the money. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to put it out there like that. She messed up
Yeah.
all the, but at some point, I became totally avoidant of what was going on financially.
Mhm.
Not saying that I don't believe that she can handle it, but it should be something that I'm actually brought into so that I'm aware of what is going on and where we stand financially. So I got to own that. That's part of my, resonating with how I'm feeling, because part of how I'm feeling is the fact that I've been totally hands off and then just dropping it in her lap and let her deal with it. So when I come to the table, I might need to come to the table apologetic because, I kind of just, not paid attention and didn't realize that you might have had a whole lot on your plate. Help me to understand, if you don't mind, like where did I go wrong? Where did I go wrong in the midst of it? So now I'm taking it, I'm owning it as though I did it all, even though she was the action officer on this, right? But taking that posture opens the door for her to be honest and forthcoming in the midst of conversation. So now we can get to the point of creating that plan and moving forward. And I think that's the best way to do that.
Yeah. I definitely like that, man. I've enjoyed everything that has been said here today. I enjoyed this conversation, and Chad and everybody who's watching, apologize for going over, but I think sometimes you guys like it. I don't think you really mind. That's why you guys still hang in there. So again, we want to be respectful of your time. We say an hour or so. We appreciate you every time that you guys stay in here and hang in with us for a little bit longer. We're gonna, if it's okay with you, man, I'm gonna do the action advice, but I just want to make it real quick, and I just want to just focus on one thing. Where is it at? All right. So I'm gonna do it, but we're just gonna do one. All right. So this is going to be the actionable advice for this week. All right. We're gonna keep it real quick and simple. All right. So you're navigating a major career shift. So you're just mad. I just want people to focus on taking away the career shift, and you're just managing life, right? Just your day-to-day life. So the only thing I want y'all to focus on is when you're navigating your life and you're unsure about the future. The uncertainty brings up feelings of self-doubt and fear of failure. How do you build the mental resilience to keep moving forward? Period. How do you build the resilience to keep moving forward? So I want people to focus on over this week is looking at your life, looking at what is bringing you feelings of uncertainty in your future, and figure out a plan or spend some time trying to figure out how you're going to build that mental resilience to keep moving forward. And that is all of the actionable advice for today. I hope people got something from this conversation. Honestly got more out of the conversation than what I thought I was going to get. Not that I had a low expectation, I never do, but sometimes even when you have good expectations, sometimes conversations can exceed those. So a coach that's directly contributed to you, because it's both of us here having a conversation. I'm not talking out here to myself. So the only way to make this conversation great was to have two contributing parties conversing. So, with that being said, Coach, what else do you have for us today?
Don't be so fixed on the right answer.
Don't be so fixed on the right answer.
The golden nugget from that young man right there.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We are done for the day. Tune in again next Tuesday for another episode of Coach's Corner. And you can also tune in on Friday night for the Hearts of Men podcast over on the Empower Perspective podcast. You can tune in on certain Saturdays, Hearts of Women, and Sundays on TikTok. So all of those are mentioned in the description at some point. So look in the description and see what we got going on, and yada yada yada. Coach, you got anything? You said it. All right, folks, we out. We will see y'all next week. Peace.